I think for me, being a leader starts with self-leadership. So being a leader for me is about learning to access all of the different parts of yourself and hopefully have them show up in the right way to others. And I do think that you can't really bring a good experience to others of you until you're actually creating a good experience of you for you.
Hey, Ruth, welcome to the People Managing People podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you here. And, we connected, I guess about a year ago, just through previous jobs, previous careers. And, I was really drawn to you and your personality and was really looking forward to getting you on our podcast. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. It's great to be here. And actually, likewise, we did have that special connection when we met. And we both, I think, even said at the time, we need to make sure that this relationship goes further than this one professional moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I remember that. We started talking about podcasts, and I know you've got a
Yeah.
podcast as well.
Yeah.
And so we'll make sure we put a link in our show notes to the podcast Pancakes and Peacocks, because it's just a fun name and a fun podcast. So listeners, you need to go check that out as well. But why don't you introduce yourself to our guests and tell us a little bit about yourself, about what you're up to right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I've spent about 20 years in the people world. I started out as a headhunter, and then I went in-house with Shazam and was with Shazam for about 5 years until we sold Shazam to Apple. And then I hopped out of there and into a machine learning fintech called Onfido. And then most recently in BP Launchpad, which was at BP's scale-up arm. So I've really sort of touched many different sizes of organizations and kinds of different organizations from the people standpoint. But where you find me right now, Tim, is in a place where I actually decided to leave my job this summer. I actually decided to take a step back and reflect on me, my relationship with work, and kind of everything, really. So I'm in this kind of brilliant moment of change for myself, and it is giving me an interesting amount of space to really think about, I guess, the professional world I participate in.
We don't often give ourselves enough permission to take that pause in our career, in our job, and just, maybe we don't for various reasons, financial, family obligations. But I think if we have that opportunity, it's important to just stop and reflect and take a look back. And not only is it important, but it also helps just to build our resilience and build us up as leaders. And so you've had an opportunity, for the past couple of decades to be in a variety of different organizations, and you've been a leader and you've worked with various leaders. Now, one question I've been asking our guests is, what does it mean to be a leader? And in your own words, and I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, I didn't prep you with this, but what does it mean to be a leader?
I think for me, being a leader starts with self-leadership. So being a leader for me is about learning to access all of the different parts of yourself and hopefully have them show up in the right way to others. And I do think that you can't really bring a good experience to others of you until you're actually creating a good experience of you for you. So I think the work starts with you, and authenticity is the secret ingredient for innovation leadership. It really is. And human beings know when we're being real and when we're not being real. And I know it's hard to be real because actually, if we take it right in deep there, Tim, I had the realization earlier this year that actually what I think is my personality and what I think is me is actually just a series of different kinds of conditioning that I've learned to stay safe in the world. So if you think about it through that lens, we don't stray from our authenticity to be malicious. It's a survival technique that we've cooked up over the years. And I think that to say, show up as you truly are is actually not even fair, because who are we? And how would we ever know? But I think if we can, a better goal is that we can show up as who we really are that day. And who we really are is vulnerable, imperfect, um, hopefully honest if we're worried about something, rather than being pulled into stress responses and creating a bad experience for other people. That was not a very concise definition, but hopefully you get the gist.
Absolutely. Just to kind of paraphrase, or what I'm hearing is it starts with being an authentic person, and bringing your true self, and your true self may vary from day to day. Um,
Right.
and it just reminds me of a recent opportunity. I spoke at a local university on a topic of resilience, and it really comes down to the core of who you are as an individual. We all respond to different situations
Mm,
differently, but I asked the class who has done work on understanding their own personal purpose, their values, their belief systems, and out of about 50 students, one person raised their hand. And so,
mm,
we're going to dive into this topic of the way of work isn't working, and I think we kind of landed on something here about,
yeah,
if we're not able to show up in an authentic and vulnerable way, uh, every day, we go into this fight or flight, this cortisol reaction, this stressor reaction, which has just
right.
such a negative effect on our workplaces.
Yeah, it really does. And actually, on resilience, um, resilience as a word became kind of twisted out of shape. And organizations were like, oh, look, we have a team of people who are working really hard and essentially annihilating themselves from the inside out. Look how resilient we are. They just keep showing up. And actually you think that being able to sustain that is resilience for a time. I think I've been guilty of that myself at one point. And actually it's so powerful to learn a different definition of what true resilience actually is.
Hmm.
True resilience is really just learning what our needs are
Yeah.
and learning how to meet those needs, right?
Yeah.
So knowing that if I feel like this today, what do I need to do to help to support me in this space where I'm at today? Or if this thing has happened, what's my best guess as to the tools that I can draw upon? And I think at an organizational level, therefore, it's not about creating sort of these crazy machine humans that can withstand anything. It's just about giving them the opportunity to put tools in their toolkit, really, and to build their own version of resilience,
Hmm.
whatever that means for them.
Yeah. No, we could totally divert our whole conversation on this topic of resilience, because it's such an important conversation to have
Yeah,
when we think about the world of leadership and leader and when we think about organizations. It's
yeah,
it's so important, but it also feeds into, you and I, when we connected a couple weeks back to talk about a podcast and something that is top of mind for you. We landed on the topic of the way of work isn't working. And I think you're
right.
you're you're spot on, Ruth, when you talk about resilience and how organizations have said, and we could come up with numerous examples of said, "Oh, look, our teams are so resilient." Well, no, maybe they're on autopilot. They're burnt out. They're stressed. So, how do we truly connect with our team? And when we think of it in the context
Mm,
of the way of work isn't working, well, maybe we'll just take a step back. What does that mean? What does that mean to you? The way of
yeah,
work isn't working.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, well, I mean, what I can say is that it isn't working for me.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm alone in that because, without wanting to jump on a load of buzz slogans that are out there right now, the Great Resignation being one of them. But I think that for me, what I was starting to experience was a relentlessness that felt uncomfortable, right? So, you're kind of driving towards things, you're building things, but then for myself, what I was seeing was the same challenges coming up over and over again, whether that is the growing pains of an organization that's scaling really fast and the human growth that it needs to be able to do that, whether it's the relationship struggles that come up, in organizations as they're scaling.
Mhm.
And I think that as a people person, particularly one who really is focused on self development and supporting the development of others, um, I think where I felt conflicted was, it feels like you want to be spending your time adding value and actually creating something that's quite creative around how we're looking at the idea of a people function in an organization and what it does. But in reality, you spend your time um, trying to hold everything together and dealing with other things that kind of pull you away from that. And I think that where I landed for myself was that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And, I was part of an amazing organization working with some amazing people. But I knew that actually what I needed to create for myself was some space to be able to reflect on and maybe reinvent how we might do this better and to create some space in my world to do that.
Hmm.
And I've been very lucky, Tim. Actually, when I took a step back, I had a bit of time, and then I was very blessed to have some companies reach out to me and say, "Hey, can you help us? Can you talk to us about how we're thinking about people?" So I'm actually quite lucky because I have organizations right now who want to experiment around this stuff and who want to think about how to do it better, even at a kind of micro level before we get to the macro stuff.
Yeah, it's I've had an opportunity to work with startups and smaller companies, whether consulting or in house, and I think you're right on the mark. And if somebody's listening to this and doesn't agree, we'd love to hear from you and love to continue the conversation. But I feel you when it comes to growing pains, when it comes to the people function. It's like getting the machine working in terms of the leadership side of things. I think there's opportunity there. Often we focus on the product, but we don't necessarily think about, okay, how are we going to scale our people organization or people function? Tie right back into resilience. It's like, okay, we're gonna scale our product, but we're gonna keep the same amount of people. So who's going to do that work? And you think about burnout. You think about what is that going to do to our organizations? The human growth side, and I'd love to unpack that a little bit with you. And so, what does that mean? The human growth, yeah.
What, to scale an organization? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and actually, just to Tim's point, if there are people listening to this who aren't just exhausted with, tell us.
Yeah.
Because we want to know, what is it? How are you doing it differently?
Yeah, exactly. We'd love to hear
you
that.
can write to Tim and he will let you know, right? But yeah, no, I mean, gosh, when I talk about human growth, so I think if you think about it from the lens of a founder who, by the way, like founding an organization, I have such a huge amount of admiration for, because it is hard to put yourself out there in the world and try to build something. So I have a huge amount of respect when it comes to what it takes to do that. But even if you start at that table, for those people, what they have to go on within themselves is like a hockey stick curve growth. Because if they want their organization to scale, they have to scale themselves at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And that means, learning the nuances of leadership really, really, really quickly, and quickly making sure that they know where they're strong and know where they're weak, so that they can kind of build a team that can work with them on that.
Yeah.
And then you've got their kind of early crew. And now that early crew, can also, I have seen that early crew scale with an organization. I mean, there's inevitably time where people start coming in from different organizations, and then you sort of have to kind of think about how you want to make sure that you're holding the culture together. But certainly Onfido, the company at this, the second but last company I was with, did a phenomenal job of having a really, really solid crew of early employees who actually stayed with the organization for a really long time. And actually many of them went on to then have their own businesses, which really is, that really is a great story if you can actually do it.
Mm-hmm.
But what it takes for those human beings is, learning how to live in innovation energy. And there are definitely characteristics and things that you need to have in your organization to support that. But I think one of the biggest things there is learning to hold the discomfort in your body of growth.
Yeah.
People think about having your own startup, and whether it's yours or not, as it grows, there's the great stuff about that. You have to hold that in your body, but you also have to hold the fear in your body.
Yeah.
And, and all of that can feel really uncomfortable. And as human beings, we're primed. Our nervous system is primed to keep us safe. So to actually do the big, crazy, amazing stuff, it means going against your probably design, which means you're constantly in dialogue with yourself and in self-doubt and in all of these different things. So to be able to grow rapidly in any way,
Yeah.
you got to get really good at that stuff.
Yeah. It sounds so easy, but it's not.
It's not.
It's something that, again, we default as humans to what we're comfortable with. If I'm
Right.
comfortable with spreadsheets, that's where I'm going to bury myself if I'm having a hard day or a bad day, or and not and drive forward those tough conversations, or those that maybe that
Mm.
conflict that needs to happen, or that growth opportunity that needs to happen. And so, in the context of, okay, the way we work isn't working, right? We know we need to develop ourselves as leaders, whether we're in a startup or in this Fortune 500 company. When we say the world of work isn't working, the way we work isn't working, for me, that means, we've set up ourselves and set up our organizations where, we're just running a machine, and we we're not able to bring our authentic self to the workplace. A part of our theme here, our purpose at People Managing People, is to build a better world of work. And how do we do that? Well, we can say, okay, well, we need tools to measure engagement, and that's helpful. But what that means to me is how do we create and build leaders who can bring their true selves and build a trusting and a trusting team? Because, man, if we have the trust of our teams, we're gonna outperform. We know that. We
Mm.
know we know that because if people are able to bring their whole self to work, we know, and data shows that organizations are going to propel themselves into way quicker than those organizations who don't have that trust, that foundation. What are your
Mm.
thoughts on that?
Yeah. So it's an interesting one. So, and I guess where my brain goes sometimes, Tim, is there another way of coming together to build stuff that's actually completely different to the organizational models that we have today? I think we're some way away from that. Yeah. So, in the here and now, I think um, I think that at the very least, to build the kind of dynamics that you need to have within a team and as a leader within your team. So, the difficult thing about self awareness is you have to be willing to step into discomfort to develop self awareness. And so, if somebody isn't willing to step into discomfort, even if they can hold the discomfort of founding a company, and this isn't just about founders, this is about all of us, right?
Yeah.
But if they can't hold the discomfort of growth, they're really going to not enjoy developing self-awareness and learning about themselves, because that means, I'm sorry folks, stepping into some of our pain and looking at how we are, why we are, and learning about ourselves. And the more impact focused we can be as leaders, and that is to consider how we show up to others and what our impact is, so much the better. But actually, do you know what? There are some ways that you can get around this. There are no shortcuts to self awareness, just to be clear. You just have to put in the work, and the work is continuous. Once you start, it just keeps on coming, right? So get ready for that.
Hmm.
But there are some things that you can do as leaders, and I think really think about your organization through the eyes of as if you're a marketer, right? And as if you're trying to think about how you might consider your customer relationships. So if you want to build trust, then what are the psychological factors that you need to have in place to make sure that you do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So unity, I love. Community is one of my values, actually, but we have an emotional need for community as humans, whether we like it or not. If we don't, it's because we probably had some stuff happen, which means we just want to be on our own,
Mm-hmm.
right? But if we can feel a connection to others, we're more likely to buy from them. That's how it works when people are marketing to us. So how can you create the connection with your people?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a reason why you see these crazes and this tribalism pop up with things like CrossFit or Soul Cycle or things like that, because what those folks do really, really well is community. And I'm not suggesting that we create this sort of cult like idolism of some that, like, please no, but you get what I'm saying. The community element is really, really important. As is the idea of kind of giving something back after receiving something. So some degree of that between us, I think, is really important. We build up our feelings of, if we can build up our reserves of good feelings towards others by giving and receiving, and that flow that we create, it's really powerful. And I think also as a leader, like, who do you buy from? You buy from people that you trust because they seem to have some kind of authority about the thing that they're doing.
Yeah.
Now, let's not go there. Now, I'm not suggesting that you go and pretend you know all of the things when you know none of the things, but actually you'll create authority by saying, I know none of the things. You know more of the things. Show me. So take that approach instead. But, we do need to feel like you're credible, right? And that we're going to buy from you because we understand and we feel that kind of, credibility from you. And then the perception of you. So that's the branding side, right? So we're massively influenced by other people. I hate that about me. But we are influenced. I try not to be, but I am influenced by other people. And I think lots of humans are the same,
Mm-hmm.
whether we like it or not. So, if other people feel good about you, we're probably going to feel good about you too. So it's kind of building that good energy. And I think if this stuff doesn't come naturally to you, then that's okay. I mean, like, look at it through the lens of how you would scale the commercial side of your business and consider your relationships with your team through that lens. And then I mean, I can go deeper into building stakeholder empathy maps and all sorts. But you get where I'm going with it, right,
Yeah,
Tim?
absolutely. Yeah, I'm following you for sure. Yeah, I think it's you're talking about some things that I haven't necessarily thought about. So I'm learning here, and because it's so easy to say, it's like, oh, we just need to build self awareness. So you take an assessment, and then it says, hey, you're not that self aware, and then you don't agree with it, so you kind of put it on the shelf and go, no, I'm the most self aware person I know, and keep
Yeah.
leading
Let me
through
go
that
back
lens.
to Strengths Finder because that
Yeah.
tells me I'm good at things.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just going to go back to the assessments that I like. That's
Yeah.
kind of putting that chip on my shoulder, making me sit high on my soapbox, and it's a great assessment. I think we need to balance out these assessments. So assessments are great, but they don't tell the whole story, and
Mm.
it doesn't help us necessarily uh, build our organizations in a way that will work. It's great. We can have a great product. We could have, a great sales team, but we could have terrible leaders in our organizations. And, just to go back to this buzzword that I, kind of cringe when I hear it, is the great resignation. But what if we in an organization, whether we're leader or people culture, wherever we are, or on that org chart, but what if we call it the great reflection? We actually take time and just
Mm.
reflect internally of going, oh, like attrition is good. We turnover is great, but let's ask ourselves, what's going on?
Yeah.
What's the reason behind it? Is there data that we can extract to help us become more resilient into the future? Resilient organizations, but also
Mm.
resilient leaders. And maybe it's, we don't like what we see when we reflect in and actually sit back and go, what's happening? I worked at an organization, and we went through a turmoil where about a quarter of the workforce left within a very short period of time. And
Mm.
there wasn't a lot of reflection. It was more, how do we just fill these seats? And so if now, many years later, if we would have actually took time and reflect and say, hey, what's happening? Like, the way we're working isn't working. What's happening?
Yeah.
It would have caused us
Yeah.
to probably have a different reaction or different change.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, have you seen that in companies that you've been involved in or you know of? And are people taking this opportunity to reflect? Because that helps build our
Mm.
self-awareness. This is one of the hardest things I had to do as a leader is when I was struggling and I had a coach, and one of the exercises was go around to your team or your peers and ask for areas that you can improve on, as well as your strengths. Man,
Mm.
what an eye-opening experience. That wasn't fun. I still
Yeah.
remember it. I still have the paper, but it was hard. And so I'm just curious, like, what has been your experience in in building that self-awareness from an organization, but also a leader perspective?
Yeah, yeah, goodness. Yeah, so I mean, I think, yeah, many organizations and humans are taking this as a moment for like a maybe rather than the great resignation, maybe it's the great retrospective. It's like the
Yes.
biggest retro we ever had.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
It's like, oh yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think hardest of all, to come back to what you're saying about feedback and bit getting prepared to hear the good and the bad, is actually there's a big part to that, which is, and I've been guilty of this. I actually am quite disciplined about asking for feedback, but where I haven't been disciplined always is when when you're not getting any critical feedback. There's something wrong, right?
Hmm.
um I have been in that disillusionment of, oh, okay, so everyone seems to be okay, and then it's like, oh no, hang on, they're not okay, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, what I would say, even from personal painful experience, um is that therefore you really have to know, at an individual level as much as possible, certainly with your direct reports, but definitely as much as you can at an organizational level too. Like, what do what you need to know people well enough to know how they're going to be comfortable criticizing you, right?
Yeah.
What do they need from you? What do they expect from you? What pleases them? What problems can you solve to keep them happy? Not in a manipulative way, but like building your relationship. But also, what doesn't work with them, and where have they reacted badly in the past? So that you actually learn the sort of dynamics of the humans that are certainly your closest humans, so that you can really create the foundation for honesty, honest reflection between all of you. And I think that is quite hard. It's quite a hard place to be. But I think as long as you can do that and you can get to that place of honesty, then wonderful. But I think many organizations right now are reflecting deeply. And some of the
Mhm.
organizations that I'm working with, I'm very lucky, like I said, that they want to look at kind of reinventing. And I'm working with some incredibly proactive and progressive CEOs who really want to build something that um, but that the people in it feel truly empowered to be a part of. um you know but I mean, and not necessarily with those companies, and not even necessarily with the ones that I've worked within, but I've definitely within businesses before heard of, and I also coach people, so I do hear about this by proxy too. And what I think we still have too much of is people believing that the experience that they're feeling of their business is the experience of everybody. So somebody in a leadership role, they feel like they're able to be honest and straightforward in their business, for example, um, and they believe that their people feel that too. But their people don't necessarily feel like that. Some do, but some don't. And I think that that's where all of this stuff comes together, right? Is that that's the very opposite of creating inclusion. you know and you can do it with the best of intention, and you really don't mean to do it, but until you're really able to find the right flow, that means that each person who is sitting at a table with you feels able to express themselves freely in the truest versions of themselves that day, as we
Hmm.
talked about earlier.
Yes.
um that's where you're going to start to really create something magical together.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful, Ruth. Thanks for sharing that. I think if we can just take that last couple minutes and just say that is how we're going to fix the way we work, that really resonates with me. There's a lot packed in there, and leaders, and I'm kind of feeling guilty of this. Of okay, I'm building a team, I'm leading a team. Are they being honest with me? Is my team being
Right.
so I know my team's going to be listening to this because they're going to be the ones publishing the podcast, and I truly want to create an environment of honesty and trust, and because um, I have my own blinders on. As leaders, we have our blinders on,
We do,
and
we do, we do.
and man, if we're not open and receptive to hearing that criticism, that feedback, I often, and I'm guilty of this. If I get feedback, I go to a place of defensiveness, and I feel the tension, and I. It takes me, it takes me a while to just calm down. So often I'll leave, I'll end a situation, or I'll leave a conversation, just like, okay, thanks for that, but I need to come back to it because and I know this about myself, that if I
Mm.
attack it, if I go at it right in that scenario, well, when I'm receiving it, I'm hearing it, but I know my reaction's not going to be great. And I learned
Right.
that early on in my career where, um, yeah, it didn't go well, and I had
Yeah.
some talking to. But as leaders, man, we have to be receptive to this, and not even as leaders, as whether you're an individual contributor or wherever you are in the organization. Like, man, growing this and being able to exercise this muscle is going to just help
Mm.
us in the way we work.
Yeah, and I like to also say to particularly lots of people when I'm coaching them is leadership is an energy, it's not a job, right? And everybody can be a leader in their lives and should be a leader in their lives,
Hmm.
because when we learn how to lead ourselves, as I was saying from the beginning, that's where we really can bring value to ourselves and the rest of the world. But anybody who is working their way up the corporate ladder, or you're kind of looking up and you're thinking, please remember those words. It's an energy, it's not a job title. And if you can start to tap in and bring that energy, before you know it, the doors of your career will start to open before you, because people will be like, wow, what is it about that person?
Yeah.
But it comes from within, and it starts with you.
I love how we've kind of tied this all back together, from, we've talked about the great resignation, great retrospect. We've talked about resilience, and I think we could spend an hour just on that conversation. But, even going right back to the definition of what it means to be a leader and tying that
Mm.
into the way we work isn't working.
Mm.
It's, it's, uh, and I love what you said. It's leadership is an energy. It's not a job. So
Yeah.
if you're listening to this and you're striving for that management title, or you've got that title, you're leading a team, it's not a title. It's the energy.
No, it's
And,
an energy.
and, and if any leadership book that or blog that you've read or podcast says that you need to bring it every single day, man, I don't know about you, but I'm human and I can't bring it every single day. But
Yeah.
what if we can be honest with our teams and say, hey, I'm not on my A game today.
Yeah. No, that's really powerful. And actually I do view leadership therefore as something that is much more multidimensional than just roles. But I do also have some kind of golden rules for innovation leadership, which are being consistent. So making sure that you develop the right consistency within yourself, so that you can start to become more consistent to your people and to the people around
Hmm.
you, because that's what builds relationships, that's what builds community. Serve before you tell. So asking questions and seeking understanding first. Focusing on collaboration as much as you can to get to the right outcome, because the answers don't lie within you most of the time. So definitely that. And then the third thing is just to always show gratitude. So, gratitude for life, where you are, your privilege, everything, but also a little thanks goes a long way. Even if a project isn't quite where it needs to be, you've got people, for the most part, investing a whole lot of themselves into trying to build something with you. And so whether the leadership is in energy or whether it's a role, a little gratitude goes a long way.
Yeah. I think that again, whoever's listening, there's three takeaways that you can go and reflect on today. I think it's an important reminder as we look to continue to build the future of work and to build a better world of work. And if we have that opportunity to be in that leadership position, leading teams, it's leading from a place of consistency, collaboration, gratitude. I mean, those are three pillars to work on starting today. Don't wait till tomorrow. Don't, try and look for a course. Connect with Ruth. We'll put her contact information in the show notes, as well as when we release the podcast. And I think, Ruth, you've added a lot of value to me, just even in this conversation. And I know people who are listening, I would encourage you to reach out to myself, to Ruth, and how can we help you in your leadership journey, as well as if you're in an organization or you're a startup and trying to look to lead better and lead from that place of innovation. I know Ruth has spent a significant amount of time in your career in this area, and so you'd be just phenomenal benefit to any organization. So with that, I just want to say thank you, Ruth, for coming on to the People Managing People podcast.
Thank you, Tim. It's been a total pleasure and wonderful to spend time with you.
Yes, and again, if you're listening, we'd love your feedback. So please head to peoplemanagingpeople.com and check out the podcast. You can follow us and subscribe to us on all your major podcast players. And with that, we'll wrap it up. And I hope you have an amazing day.